It's Thursday, September 7th. I'm meteorologist Quaylin Murphy with the tropics update for the Atlantic Basin. That's the Gulf, Caribbean Sea and the Atlantic Ocean. All basins dealing with some tropical activity with the exception of the Caribbean Sea. Here's the headliner. Hurricane Irma, winds of 175 miles per hour. This is the latest update from the National Hurricane Center. Winds backing off just a tad bit. Still a very powerful system moving west-northwest at 16 miles per hour. That pressure at 921. The center of circulation north of the Dominican Republic right now, but that cloud shield certainly hanging over Haiti and also beginning to push towards the Turks and Caicos Islands. Still impacts here over Puerto Rico as well, but that extension well to the west and also to the north. That center of circulation very much visible here on our satellite imagery, and it's about 73 miles or so east northeast of Puerto Plata, Dominican Republic. So that's where the location of the eye is right now. The intensity forecast has not changed too much, and neither has the track. Just a slight shift to the east. But again, Irma will likely be a Category 5 or 4 hurricane as it moves south of the Bahamas into Saturday morning and early Sunday morning. Likely still a very much major hurricane as it gets closer to the coast of Florida. It will hold on to its intensity because of its movement over those warm waters. Very little dealings with the land with this system, if at all, over those smaller islands. So certainly not enough to knock the system down in terms of intensity. Notice the track not as far out west of Florida right now, but that eastern track still lends itself to possibly offshore centralized location of that eye wall. But here's the center track from the National Hurricane Center, bringing it very much close to Miami into early Sunday morning as a Category 4 hurricane. It takes it to the north, of course, through Fort Lauderdale and then offshore, and then a secondary landfall likely for the United States, which could be anywhere between Georgia and North Carolina. Right now, that point is closer to Charleston as a Category 1 hurricane, and then quickly weakening as it moves inland down to tropical storm status. Either way it goes, the coasts of Florida, all of Florida actually, and Georgia to South Carolina and North Carolina need to be prepared for a major hurricane landfall with this system. Here's a forecast track computer ensemble models, and again showing some pretty good agreement from the eastern edge of Florida out to sea. So there you find that agreement there, which is what you're looking for when you're trying to put together these forecasts. And then you see that spread of the models as we move into early next week from South Carolina on the very western side to Charleston, also possibly into parts of North Carolina into next week with that secondary landfall. In addition to watching where the center will be, we're also watching for where that turn could potentially take place. The GFS still earliest on the turn into Saturday morning. The Euro still lagging behind a little bit on that turn, but both do show the turn will happen and occur through the weekend. The GFS forecast model still pulling that center of circulation just offshore, while the European model keeps that center of circulation over southeast Louisiana into Sunday afternoon. So this is something we'll continue to watch. Models pretty much holding on to that northerly continuum into Monday morning, and then the center of circulation for the GFS closer to South Carolina, while the Euro is closer to Georgia. So again, that's why we have that big spread and uncertainty after day 3 of the forecast track. That's something we'll watch. In terms of the steering of this system and the reason why it's going to turn north, all about this trough. You hear us talking about it, that big dip in the upper levels of the atmosphere, and that dip as far south right now as Alabama and Louisiana. So we're seeing that cooler air. Thankfully, we're going to have some more energy working down through that system through the plain states, and that will help to push the trough even deeper south through the weekend, which is why we're going to see that reach down in the trough, grabbing Irma by Saturday, and again pulling it more to the north throughout the start of next week. So that's where the steering comes into play. Updates on warnings and watches right now. A hurricane watch has been issued for Florida. I told you earlier that this would likely be the case, so that has now been issued with this latest advisory, and this continues for pretty much all of southeast Florida with those hurricane watch, hurricane impacts likely in place. Rainfall potential. This is through Tuesday morning of next week. 5 to 12 inches of rainfall possible on the very eastern edge of Florida, and notice 3 to 6 inches possible from Georgia up into the Carolinas with this rainfall. We're going to watch Irma be a mover. It's not going to stall as Harvey did over Texas, so we're not expecting a big expanse of rainfall potential. Gusty winds will continue. These are the tropical storm force winds, the probability here. So again, likely for southeastern Florida, and then we start to see still that 60 to 70% range as we get into Georgia and into South Carolina. North Carolina roughly 30 to 40% right now, but again, this all depends on the track and the center of Irma as it continues up the eastern seaboard. Hurricane force winds likely closer to the Bahamas, still that 60 60% chance roughly around southeastern Florida. And of course, that backs off as we get closer into the Carolinas and Georgia. But this will be something to watch, of course, through the weekend. Jose, still Category 1 hurricane, winds of 90 miles per hour, moving west-northwest at 18. This system will quickly pick up some steam and intensify, likely Category 3 status into Friday. I did put the spaghetti plots on here so that you can see what I'm looking at, which is a curvature likely back into the open waters of the Atlantic. And that's what the GFS forecast model is showing. So this system won't continue on a direct northwesterly path. It'll likely turn back around with that steering current in the upper level. So we'll watch that one. But I've also paused the system so that you can see that there are more disturbances coming off the coast of Africa. And we'll continue, of course, to keep a close eye on those. And then we have Hurricane Katia still in the Gulf of Mexico, stationary right now. So lots of rainfall still being pushed towards the Mexican coast. All that moisture also down into portions of the southern portions of the Bay of Campeche. Winds of 80 miles per hour with this system, and it will likely make landfall late Friday into Saturday. So we'll watch out for this, but it could strengthen to Category 2 status before making landfall and then weakening. So we've been through the K name. Now the next name on the list is Lee, and that'll be possible in the next week and a half or so. Your hurricane frequency chart, we're getting closer to the climatological peak of the season, which is September 10th. Of course, as we roll into October, we'll start to see that chance of some tropical systems winding down for us. But of course, lots to watch. The good news for southeast Louisiana, though, no impacts from any of these current tropical systems right now that are out there, including Katia in the Gulf, Irma, which is working through the Caribbean islands right now, and Jose way out in the open waters of the Atlantic. We have some great weather in store for the weekend and early next week. So let's appreciate what's happening here over southeast Louisiana and coastal Mississippi. That's your latest forecast. Of course, you'll get more this afternoon at 4 o'clock with Chief Meteorologist Margaret Orr. Thanks for joining us here at WDSU.com.